Hare Krishna, welcome back to the 7th in a series entitled, what are we talking about? I forgot. No, we're talking about women. That's why so many people are watching this. And we're talking about men and sexuality. Do you realize we've had more people watching this show than any other show I've ever done? And do you realize that I knew that was going to happen when you talk about these things? It's very interesting. So we've been talking about the position of, particularly been focused on the last 6 classes, how Vedic culture looks at women and how we are to understand that within the context of our world today. We're going to continue that. I want to welcome all of you who are here and have been here. Of course, our faithful Bhakti and Carol is always here, and Patrick, welcome. And Adi is here. And tonight in the studio running the show we have Manu, who we haven't seen in a long time. Manu might even get excited and come in front of the camera and say something. Or maybe at least he'll say something from back there. So I have something else I'm going to read tonight. But first I have to tell you that I'm not as skinny as I look, although I'm not fat. But the way this camera is in wide angle, it makes me look thinner, and so I don't have such a long head and a thin face. But you'll still recognize me in real life when you see me. And just had to say that for the sake of posterity. Manjesh, good to see you, or in some form. Is that proper? Good to see that you're here. Okay, so we're going to continue along the lines of the discussion, but it's going to take the form of another devotee answering a question. And this is Ramapat Swami. Ramapat Swami has no idea I'm doing this, and I trust that he feels comfortable with me reading this because this was available on the internet, at least circulated, and it's a Krishna conscious answer to a woman who had a question. So here's the question, and you'll find the question interesting, because this gives us an idea how many women, especially those who are not that familiar with the Krishna consciousness movement or who are coming to Krishna consciousness, will question some of the things that they find in the Srimad Bhagavatam that talk about women. So here's her question. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, chapter 15, description of the kingdom of God, we find some verses and purports with language I find problematic. So this is written by a woman. This is her question. For example, Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 15th chapter, text 17, says, quote, in the Vaikuntha planets the inhabitants fly in their airplanes, accompanied by their wives and consorts, and eternally sing of the character and activities of the Lord, unquote. So you think, well, what's wrong with that? That's the interesting part. So let's hear what she has to say. She says, in these verses it seems that the archetype of spiritual identity is characterized as inherently male. Quote, the inhabitants of the Vaikuntha planets and the female form, even in spiritual perfection, is relegated to the role of sidekick. This is not a quote. She's quoting the inhabitants, and then she's writing. The word inhabitants came from the verse. Of Vaikuntha, and the female form, even in spiritual perfection, is relegated to the role of a sidekick, accompanied by their wives and consorts. In other words, she's saying, wait a minute. So the male are the main, and then the wives or consorts are on the side. They're appearing, from her point of view or her understanding, they're appearing to be sidekicks or less than the men. The subject-object framing of the male-female forms and the inherent implication of relative status appears to contradict the assertions of absolute equality in a pure spiritual atmosphere amongst all beings, moving and non-moving. to be found in other verses, such as Srimad Bhagavatam, verse 3:15-16, which says, quote, everything in the Vaikuntha planets is spiritual and personal. And numerous purports. In other words, she's seeing that the Bhagavatam is making a distinction between the male and female, whereas at the same time the Bhagavatam is stating that everything, every living entity is equal. What to speak of human? All forms of life are equal. So, this appears to be a contradiction of what she says, the absolute equality in a pure spiritual atmosphere. In other words, we're all spiritual, and in a pure spiritual atmosphere, there would be absolute equality. And here, in what appears or supposed to be a pure spiritual atmosphere, there appears to be inequality, that the females are the sidekicks. They're taking a back seat. However, Srila Prabhupada's wording in the purport to this verse seems to reinforce this understanding and sets us up for an even greater implication of inequity in verse 20. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:15. I'm not sure. She's saying in verse 20, then she's saying 3:15. I guess she's saying the third canto, chapter 15, page 17. 17p, page 17, verse 20. Here's the verse, quote, the inhabitants of Vaikuntha give first preference to the service of the Lord, not their own sense gratification. Serving the Lord in transcendental love yields such transcendental pleasure that in comparison, sense gratification is counted as insignificant. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:15-20 states, the inhabitants of Vaikuntha travel in their airplanes made of lapis lazuli, emerald, and gold. Although crowded by their consorts, who have large hips and beautiful smiling faces, they cannot be stimulated to passion by their mirth and beautiful charms. So she says, between the purport to verse 17 and the text of verse 20, we find the implication that even in this archetype of spiritual perfection, the female form is relegated to a second-class position and is intended to function as a passion stimulator, a function the male form spiritual archetype is presumably immune to. Despite considerable time given to the concept of spiritual equality of all jivas in both verses and purports, the problem remains that an educated person may reasonably assert that a society's biases are revealed in its language, and when the language of gender inequality is found in a religious scripture, particularly one meant to be understood literally, and even more particularly when the literature is describing the ultimate spiritual archetype, to be aspired by the faithful, then you have to expect a culture, a society, or a religious institution whose values are derived from such literature to instill in its members a sense of righteousness in the devaluing of the female form, a glaring imperfection that invalidates any claim that the literature itself is the Word of God. Parenthesis, since God would never countenance such inequity. As opposed to the word of a patriarchal power structure comprised of fallible human beings, men who contrive a misogamous theology. This is heavy, right? To assuage, I don't even know how to pronounce this, assuage their gynophobia and justify their social domination. I know the issue of institutionalized sexism is not new to ISKCON, but this is the first time I've noticed the implication of the language found in verses directly referring to spiritual archetypes. No doubt the result of my education by a discerning cynic predisposed to feminist politics and testimony to 30 years of poor study habits that I'm trying to rectify. Do you have any suggestions as to how I may properly understand the nature of the language in these verses for myself, and for the sake of explaining it to others as transcendental literature that informs a transcendental culture? Well, that's a very good question. You all agree that's a good question? Did anybody not understand the question? Aside from myself. No, I did understand it. Pretty much. So here she's noting two things. One, that the women seem to take an inferior role, somewhat, and that they seemed to be attracting the men, or perhaps that is their eternal function, to allure and attract, which she feels seems out of place in a literature that teaches equality of all beings, and also that it would be inconsistent with the rest of its spiritual teachings, or seem to indicate that it is propounding the difference between men and women, and that women are inferior. And she says something here. She says it would instill in its members a sense of righteousness and the devaluing of the female form, particularly the male members. A glaring imperfection that invalidates any claim that that the literature itself is the Word of God. In other words, how could this be spiritual literature? How could this be the Word of God? Because it's it's devaluing women, or it appears to be. So she's presenting it in somewhat of a humble way, saying it appears to be devaluing women. And how am I to understand this in light of the fact that this is supposed to be coming from God? Okay. And then she mentions that she knows this is an ongoing issue, and it has been, and it continues to be an issue in ISKCON. But she's saying this is the first time I've noticed it, particularly in this way in the verses. So how do I deal with this? So now Ramapad Swami was, somehow or other, was given the opportunity to answer this woman. I think her question was put out for anyone who would like to answer her. So here's his answer. Let's discuss it. You are to the point in stating that Srimad Bhagavatam is a transcendental literature that is describing a transcendental culture. Therefore, to understand it, we have to be free from biases and preconceptions that come with our own material culture and upbringing. We can admit to begin with, it is quite likely that we are imposing the biases of our conditioning upon a transcendental literature, as opposed to presuming that the literature is reflecting the society's bias. In other words, he's saying the literature is not biased, but we're biased, and then therefore we're seeing bias within the literature. And the literature is presenting a culture which is transcendental and is actually free of these biases, but we're not seeing it that way. If we're seeing through red glasses, the world appears red. This is quite possible that the perceived inequality is most likely springing from our own predisposition and sensitivity to this subject, as you acknowledge, and the connotations we provide to the language based on our present social context. In other words, you read a word, and according to the social context you live in, that word has particular meaning, or it may stir up certain emotions within you, or it may make you angry. A particular word can make you angry because of experiences you have within your life and within the society you live. And so those words have connotations carried with them, or like they say in psychology, those words anchor certain emotions or experiences. So thus it is quite possible that the perceived inequality is most likely springing from our own predisposition and sensitivity to the subject, as you acknowledge, and the connotations we provide to the language based on our present social context. If we carefully reflect, we can understand that in reality the Bhagavatam is describing a totally different cultural paradigm. We have to have some appreciation of this culture to understand its conception of equality. There is certainly absolute equality in Vaikuntha, but not homogeneity. There is all variety and even hierarchy. We have discussed this in previous digests in different contexts. In other words, there can be equality, but there can be hierarchy. And so many people tend to think if there's hierarchy, then there's inequality. But things are not always equal on every level, but they can be equal on some levels. So that's the point that he's making. There can be a certain equality amongst all beings, but there can simultaneously be a hierarchy due to who they are and their natural position according to who they are. So the Prabhupada would often say that there is hierarchy and you can't make things which are not equal. That would be artificial. But spiritually we understand, or if we're fortunate or advanced, we see that everything and everyone is equal. But there still can be distinctions made due to the position. Or sometimes, like for example, sometimes Prabhupada would say, well, there are different rasas, and progressively each rasa is higher. So that the highest rasa, or highest rasa, the greatest devotees are the gopis. But other times he would say, but there's no difference. Everyone is equal. So they're both true. Because you could levy the same argument and say, well, we're giving a higher position to the gopis in Braj Leela and Krishna Leela than we are to the cowherd boys. So then you could turn the argument around and say, I could say as a man, well, what's going on here? The women are being exalted above the men. But what's being exalted is the intimacy of the relationship, the depth of love, with the intensity of love within that relationship. But on another platform, they're equal. Prabhupada once said, if you offer a flower to Krishna and you put it on the feet of the deity, then an ant may be on that flower, and then the ant will crawl off the flower, and then the ant will touch the feet of the deity. And Prabhupada said that ant is as good as the pujari. He's kissing Krishna's feet. So that's an absolute standard. Another time Prabhupada said, all service is absolute, whatever you do for Krishna is absolute. And then sometimes he would say, the most important service is such and such. And sometimes he would tell one devotee, this is the most important service, and he would tell another devotee something else was the most important service. And they were both the most important. So simultaneously you had two most important, or three most important, which according to the English language, if it's most important, it's unique. There's not two most important. So we have to have room for that conception. Bhakti Carol says, I have been told many times in the past few years that I am to serve the man, that I am subservient to man, that I should accept the man as guru, and that my brain weighs less, and I'm not as mentally capable as a man. This is presented as fact. But I'm also told that because of past karma, I am supposed to be in this role. And Kremlin says many of the Western definitions of modern sexuality are from secular cultural anthropology. So, let us address Bhakti Carol's question. I am to serve man. I am subservient. I should accept the man as guru. And my brain weighs less. And I'm not as mentally capable as man. The brain weighs less, we'll talk about another day, because that's an interesting topic. And part of that topic is, does the weight of the brain correspond with the level of intelligence? And then that requires a discussion of what is the definition of intelligence. And as I said previously, there are many women who can do certain things better than men. Does that mean the men are less intelligent? Does that mean the women are more intelligent? As far as my understanding of Prabhupada's general description of intelligence, as he uses it, you can use it in two ways: spiritual intelligence or material intelligence. And men generally have a different kind of intelligence than women, and in some ways women can do certain things better than men. So some ways they're smarter, and some women are smarter in certain areas. Does that mean they're more intelligent? From the spiritual point of view, intelligence means to discriminate between matter and spirit, to understand we're not the body, to be detached, things of this nature. Is that the domain only of men? Not necessarily. Or is it easier for men? Not necessarily. For some men it is. For some women it is also. For some men it's difficult to be spiritual. So what we learn from Scripture is that within a culture in which men and women are given a certain training, and men and women are married very young, then these things wouldn't even be a problem for you, and it wouldn't be a problem for anybody, because nobody would be made unhappy by this, and everybody would understand how this works. So I'll tell you something I just read. Prabhupada was asked, they said, Srila Prabhupada, can you tell us something about household life? And Prabhupada said, yes. When the girl is 8 and the boy's about 12, they get married. Then the girl regularly goes to the home of the boy, and the girl learns from the boy's mother what he likes and how to take care of him. And then when she reaches puberty, then she moves in and they have a kid. And they start having children. And then Prabhupada said, that's all I can tell you about household life. So how do you like that explanation? So it's something like, Carol, that's something like what you're saying. And that explanation without understanding the context of the social system sounds pretty strange. But if you understand the context with the culture from which that comes, and how it works, and how it did work, then it starts to make sense. So understanding that culture, yes, the woman would happily do whatever the man said. The man was, most of the men were trained in Gurukula, so they could be the guru, because in that culture the woman did not take a spiritual master directly. They were not taking Diksha. Their husband would act as their guru. So in a situation in which a woman is taken care of by her father and by her husband, so she's satisfied, and that's the first man she ever had a relationship with. And in a culture where men and women stay together, even if they don't get along perfectly, then you can understand all these things. Now, in our culture, it doesn't always work that way, because not all men are qualified, not all women are able to just do whatever a man says. Neither would it necessarily be good to do whatever a man says, particularly when the man is not capable of giving good instruction in every situation. So then you have another context. But you understand the principle of it, and we have been discussing the principle of it, is that it's generally woman's nature to be taken care of by a man, and they can be happy being subservient to a man if the man is qualified and the man takes well care of them. So, but generally, what we find in today's world, it's a combination of a little of both. That sometimes it may be necessary in certain situations for the woman to dominate in a certain area. Maybe she's better at managing something in the house, so she'll take charge of that. And a husband who understands that will be submissive to that. He'll agree. Oh yeah, you're better at that than I am. But ideally, the man should be spiritually stronger. It's not always the case. And if he is spiritually stronger, the woman would naturally want to follow him. She would respect him that way. So we have to understand things within the context, and then we have to see the principle and how it applies today in our lives. And most women today would find it difficult to be, like you say here, you say that I should be subservient to men. Of course, that word subservient, it can be, the connotation can be that we'll just do whatever they say and don't think. And if it's hurtful, if it's difficult for you, if it's degrading or whatever, you don't say anything. You don't do anything. No. So when we say the woman should serve the man and be subservient, that would be, as I said, in a situation where the man is qualified, so he would not do anything which would be detrimental to the well-being of the wife. So then you say, so the thing about the brain, if you want to talk a little bit about it, that was something that came up at some time in the world of psychology, that was believed. And then later on, they said, no, that's not true. And they had different ideas about the size of the brain and how it affected intelligence and where intelligence comes from. And then recently there was an article where they're stating no, that it is true that men have bigger brains than women. But I was told Marilyn Monroe had a very big brain, and it's kind of humorous because I was told the person who came up with the theory had a small brain, and that some Nobel laureates have small brains. So, and some people say that Prabhupada was just using the material, not that that's a Vedic text, but that was, when he went to school, that's what was being taught. So if he thought something was being accepted as scientific fact in society, and that information could be used to make a point, then he would use it. And if it came to be shown to him that, well, that's false, that's not true, then he wouldn't use it. But some people say, well, he wasn't really serious. Other people say, no, he was, that's what he learned. Some people say that that's not true, and now they're saying, some scientists are saying that is true. But Prabhupada jokingly told the ladies, he said, when you become a devotee, your brain grows. Your brain gets bigger when you become Krishna conscious. And oftentimes Prabhupada would glorify the women. And when these discussions would come up, he'd say, these devotee women, they're the most intelligent. So I think if you think you're less intelligent, there's the problem that you'll act less intelligently. So intelligence means to understand that this life is meant for serving Krishna. And if you understand that and you remain in Krishna consciousness, that you're considered the most intelligent. And we had also discussed that sometimes when we discuss less intelligent, it can also refer to being attached to the body. And so women tend to be more attached to hearth and home in general. So that is sometimes a meaning of less intelligent, or sometimes, as we said, they may be more prone to sense gratification than men. And men ideally are supposed to be more sense controlled, and then the woman who serves that man who is sense controlled can also remain sense controlled. These are general descriptions, and I know many women who are more self-controlled than I am. So we get a general idea, and then we apply it as best we can. But I have seen a big problem that when women were told repeatedly they were less intelligent, some women told me that they came to this point where they knew they had natural abilities in certain areas because they did those things before they were devotees. And then when they became devotees, they kind of got in this mindset or mind frame that they're not intelligent, and they couldn't even do the things that they used to do. They couldn't do them well any longer because they'd been told that they're less intelligent. So we have to try to understand it in a proper way, and not understand it in a way that would cause us to end up like that. Well, I can't really do anything because I'm less intelligent. We have very intelligent women in our movement, amazingly intelligent, amazingly qualified. And I'm sure you are also very intelligent and very qualified. And Prabhupada would sometimes say, you American boys and girls are very intelligent. He wouldn't distinguish. So my understanding has always been that in general women tend to be a little more bodily conscious, a little more attached to home, to family, to comfort. They find it more difficult to do austerity. They're more concerned with how they look. Jewelry, clothes, more concerned in general than men. That's been my understanding of the application of it. And in general, mathematicians, scientists, you'll find them more amongst men. And of course, some people will argue, well, that's just because society has brainwashed women or hasn't given them the opportunity, so that may be true to some degree. But I think generally you'll find that men tend to be a little better, unless the women are from China or maybe South India. Then they're good in math too. So, it's Kali Yuga also. So I find these things it's difficult to generalize. So let's go on. Let's see. Bhakti and Carol, she didn't get to hear the answer because her lights went out. Well, Bhakti and Carol, that answer is it's just been recorded and you'll get to hear it if you missed it. The moderator, the one and only Manu, says, aren't we all just playing the role of man or woman in this short life and have been both many times? We are equal-sized tiny spirit souls. Well, I think the problem is that if we're men and we're too much against women, or we're women and we're down on men, then we may in our next birth take birth as a man or a woman. And the ultimate, the ultimate position is that we are not attracted or repulsed by the opposite sex. We're not on the case of the opposite sex. We're not overly engrossed in thinking about them, which would mean either very attracted to them or repulsed. And then we can, as Manu says, you can also think, well, I was a woman in my last life, and how I'm in this body, and I'm walking around in this vehicle. And beyond that, it's just a vehicle, and that's all it is. And it has its some nature, and I have the nature of this vehicle, and she has the nature of that vehicle. And we just have to act properly according to the nature we have. Even within the same sex, we have different natures, and we have to act according to those natures. We have to use those natures and act accordingly. So then Prabhupada was asked, is it true women are less intelligent? And I mentioned this in another show, and Prabhupada said, yes, if you think you're a woman, then you're less intelligent. So whenever they got into these discussions about women being less intelligent, then Prabhupada would always, make these other statements. Your brains grow when you become a devotee. If you think you're a woman, you're less intelligent. He never really pushed it. But he did mention it when women wanted to be independent. And Prabhupada said, your independence is that the man will get you pregnant and he'll leave you, and then you'll have to have an abortion or you have to go on welfare. And when he would say that, they didn't really get it, because they were so much in the mood of being equal with men. And then sometimes Prabhupada would remark and said, when they didn't get it, he wouldn't remark, maybe even would remark to them or remark to his disciples. When they wouldn't get it, he said, therefore I say 32 ounces. In other words, he was saying, that's the less intelligence, that you don't understand that men are exploiting you. In the name of women's liberation or freedom, you're being exploited. So then he would say, therefore I say 32 ounces. So that's the 30, if you want to say 32 ounce, that's the 32 ounce, to allow a man to cheat you, to exploit you, or to even think you're a woman in the first place, or if I think I'm a man, that's less intelligent. One Mataji told me that maybe because women are in a serving roles, maybe it can be easier for us to learn the role of serving devotees. Well, that's true. Women have the motherly nature, they like to serve. Men have the Purusha nature, they like to be served. And we're all meant to be servants. So you can cultivate that mood. And that is an advantage, no doubt. Or whatever can be an advantage, then take advantage of it. If you do have that mood to serve. Women's egos tend to be a little smaller than men's. I've noticed. Have you noticed that, Manu?
I think any married man can attest to that.
Yeah, men, the men are into being honored. A lot of times if women are honored, it just embarrasses them. But a lot of times men, they need it. So there is some, psychology there of, the female being subservient to the man, because that's just, it works better in the relationship. The man, I've seen that I've seen some men who are married to women who are very, very qualified, very, very capable women. And sometimes I see the women correcting the man or questioning the man, and I can see the man getting very defensive. Because men don't like to be in that role. They don't like to be subordinated by their wife. Now maybe when the man's very Krishna conscious, he won't mind. He'll be open to admitting all his faults. But until then, men generally don't like to play second fiddle to their wives. At least they like to have some control. Now the problem is, when the woman doesn't want to play second fiddle and the man doesn't want to play second fiddle, then you get a problem. Or if the woman wants to play first fiddle and the man's humble enough to play second fiddle, then that can work. But then some men would say, but that man, he's not wearing the pants in the family. He's not wearing the dhoti in the family. That he needs to be stronger. There's something to be said about that. But in some situations, with a very strong-willed woman, it may turn into hell. So generally what I find most married couples try to find some balance somewhere in the middle according to what's suitable. And in some relationships the women are very happy to be totally subordinate to the men. And the men are very happy to have a wife who's totally subordinate. Some men would feel awkward having a wife that just said, yes honey, whatever you say, I'll do it. They feel awkward like that. Okay. Kremlin never got a chance to play second fiddle. I was the fourth chair cello. Well, now you're trained up, so you'll be submissive to your wife. So, or maybe you and your wife can start a band, and then you could both play first fiddle, but you could make sweet music together. So, now, here's a thought that I want to throw out. And it's very important. I think it's fundamental to this discussion. Srila Prabhupada was really not attached to men being in superior roles and women being in the subservient role if that didn't work out. One devotee wrote to Srila Prabhupada, said, Srila Prabhupada, my wife is more Krishna conscious than I am. And Prabhupada said, then you should listen to her. So, if you know anything about Srila Prabhupada, you know that Prabhupada was very practical. And although he may teach a certain philosophy, he would not enforce it against what was practical. Another point is that he wanted us to be happy. He just wanted us to be happy in Krishna consciousness. So if we're trying to go by the letter of the law and we both end up being miserable, that would be counterproductive, counterintuitive as well. So, and I told you a story in which a devotee had read these things, as Carol's saying, read these things that are in Shastra, that women should be subordinate to men. So the devotee said, Prabhupada, should my wife do whatever I tell her? And Prabhupada said, and you should be so arrogant to think like that? So, if a husband has a wife who's very submissive to him, and the husband is Krishna conscious, he would not be arrogant and think, okay, since she'll do whatever I say, then I'll treat her like a slave. He wouldn't do that. Because affection and servitude is part of bhakti. So It would never be that way. So, the word subservient can be scary because men could take advantage of that. And they could take it so far and say, well, you should do whatever I say, even if I want to break the principles, you should do that. And then in the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada said, if the husband is breaking the principles, the wife is not obligated to stay with him. So, he took this subservience to a certain point and said, but beyond that, you don't have to. Of course, if the husband is asking you to engage in sinful activity, it's not your obligation to do it. So, subservience comes out of affection. It really ultimately can't be forced. And when you understand it can't be forced, and then you read those statements, then you realize that the husband and wife had a special relationship. If the wife actually served the husband so faithfully and submissively, and so chastely, then there must have been this intense respect and affection for the husband and honor. Perhaps even there wasn't great affection because maybe they weren't ideally compatible, but there was tremendous respect. And then in the Shastra said, well, the wife should see the husband like Guru. So that's a very high position because you see the Guru equal to God. So for the wife, husband was a kind of God. And that was her highest duty, to keep the husband happy. Just like our duty is to keep our Guru happy, to serve our Guru. So it was a similar relationship. So if you understand it in how you would understand a relationship between disciple and Guru, that submission, surrender can only come out of affection, duty, and this debt to pay back. So the husband's giving the wife so much, she feels indebted. So then it's natural. So then we read that today, but we don't see those kinds of men. We don't see men were raised that way. And we don't see that, or that you weren't raised or trained to be that kind of wife. Trained to only have one man in your life from an early age, and then that your goal of life was to make that man happy. So you can understand, if you were trained that way, that your highest religious duty is to make your husband happy, it would be a lot easier to take a submissive role. Just like Prabhupada would chastise devotees. They wouldn't fight back. They'd say, yes, Prabhupada, you're right. And sometimes Prabhupada would be heavy. So they understood it was affection. Ultimately, he was just being affectionate to them. So that's the context in which we have to understand these things. Okay. Kremlin. My education has made me a skeptic. Skeptic of what? Fourth cello? That was the last discussion. Can we go back up a little bit? What was he a skeptic of? What? That women could ever be submissive like that? Yeah, that may be true. Or that you could ever be a good husband? That may be true. Could ever be ideal? So in the present context of what's ideal? Well, if you can create a situation in which you're both happy and you're advancing in Krishna consciousness, I would say that's ideal. Even if you don't do everything else by the book. That's ideal. If you are Krishna conscious according to the definition of what Krishna consciousness is, not something you make up. Okay. Bhakti Carol says, I have been told many times in the past few years that I am to serve the man. Okay. Yeah. All right. I got lost here. I went back. Okay. So here, Bhakti Carol says, I read it as true. It's true what? That we only have 32 ounces. Moderator says, are we all just playing the role? Yeah, we read that. Equal size spirit souls. And Bhakti and Carol, when you became a devotee, don't forget, your brain did grow. Could be bigger than mine by now. When Mataji told me that maybe because women are in serving roles, we read that. Okay, I'm totally lost here. I got my early religious instruction from my grandmother. She taught me to pray daily. Yeah, that's nice. Jayadvaita Swami said, we don't need more sannyasis in our movement, we need more grandmothers. Because they have the wisdom. So much wisdom, practical wisdom. So, the moderator says, and there are statements in Shastra instructing men to see their wives as Devi, representatives of the goddess of fortune. You were mentioning that husband is to be viewed as Guru or God or Pati. Yes, that's true. So, the problem arises. Let's take this a little further. The question she's asking here about these male-female roles. Well, let's take it and let's say we had a similar view, but we were looking at the roles of guru and disciple. Then you could look at the role of guru and say, this is a recipe for disaster. Here, these disciples are honoring this person like God. And the scripture says they should do whatever he says. That the words of the guru are the life and soul of the disciple. So then someone will think, this is a recipe for total abuse, total exploitation of the disciple by the guru. And in many cases, they're right. But as Prabhupada said, that person's not a guru. One person asked Prabhupada, he said, well, they're talking about genuine gurus, and gurus are not genuine. Good gurus and bad gurus. So the man said, isn't so-and-so a bad guru? And Prabhupada said, if he's bad, how can he be guru? No such thing as bad guru. If he's bad, he can't be a guru. Guru's only good. So when we're looking at what is guru, what is husband, within the context of the instructions of how the disciple or the wife should behave, then we have to look at the definition of husband. You understand what I'm saying? So we're focused now on the woman. The woman should be this way, this way, this way, this way. But it doesn't make sense until you look at the way the husband should be. And then you could understand, well, a woman might think, well, yeah, if I had a husband who was like this, like this, like this, then I could more easily or easily be subservient. If I had a husband who treated me like the goddess of fortune, then certainly I could be subservient out of love and affection and gratitude, appreciation. So in the same way, we serve the guru just like he's God. Why? Because he's given us so much, because he's taking care of us, because our life is a product of, our spiritual life is a product of his mercy. So we naturally want to give ourselves to him. So it says the disciple should be a certain way, but you also see that when the disciple engages in devotional service, they naturally become that way because of the nature of the guru. So because of the nature of the husband, the wife would become that way. So husbands, if you don't want to make it difficult on your wives to be good wives by not being a good husband. Okay. Good point, moderator. 5 stars for the moderator. Bhakti Carol says, I truly feel indebted to the devotee who's my fiancé. He teaches me. He's your knight in shining armor. Yeah. That's wonderful. That's the whole point. Now, relationships between husband and wife can evolve into many nuances of that, or even, shall I say, perversions of that. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, as I was saying. It may be bad, but it may be desirable for that particular couple, according to who they are. What if the woman is more advanced, and the woman is protecting the husband? And actually, also the woman protects the husband, because the Bhagavatam says she's like the fortress. She protects the husband so he'll not be attracted by other women. And so she is sometimes said to be his intelligence. So, that's a contradiction, isn't it? Woman is less intelligent, and she's the intelligence of the man. How does that work? Okay, should we read some more? All in favor say Haribol. Let's see where this gets us.
I was reminded of the story of Vrinda Devi as you were talking. Who was devoted to her demoniac husband.
Vrinda Devi devoted to her demoniac husband, and then what happened?
Well, her husband couldn't be defeated by Vishnu because of the chastity of Vrinda Devi.
Oh, her husband couldn't be defeated by Vishnu because of the chastity of his wife. And wasn't there another story where a woman kept the sun from rising or setting to save her husband?
I don't know that one.
Because, so in other words, the chastity of the woman is her power. She doesn't think of any other man other than her husband. So, say, well, So this is a really good point, because, okay, we're saying in Vedic culture, the woman sees her husband something like guru, something like God. But she honors and appreciates him so much that just as we have a guru, and we're chaste to our guru, we don't go out and get another guru who undermines our guru. We're chaste to our guru. The wife, because of her affection, because of her respect for the position of her husband, remains chaste to her husband, so protected from the allurements, sexual allurements of this world. It's a, if you study the Vedic concept of varnashram, and particularly grihastha ashram, you will see how the whole thing is geared to control sex. And Prabhupada has said this many times. He said, because in 3 ashrams there's no sex, and then in the grihastha ashram it's restricted. So the whole grihastha ashram is organized in a way to restrict it, to protect the man and the woman from any kind of illicit connection with other men or women, and then to gradually purify themselves so they become detached from sex. So we also have to understand these things we read in Shastra in light of the ultimate goal of becoming detached. And the ultimate goal is not just to be happy or just to be equal, but the ultimate goal is to become detached, to become Krishna conscious and go back to guided. So I think a lot of people get sidetracked along the way, and they think, well, the ultimate goal is to be happy, which can sometimes mean the ultimate goal is sense gratification. But even if we say the ultimate goal is happy, we should really say the ultimate goal is to be happy in Krishna consciousness. So being happy and being happy in Krishna consciousness are not always the same thing. So if the relationship, the grihastha ashram, can make us happy in Krishna consciousness, then it's successful. If it just makes us happy, then materially it's successful. It's like being in the mode of goodness. You're happy, then you take birth again. So, we really have to distinguish this, because what you see is that generally in the name of spirituality, at least what I'm finding more and more and more, in the name of spirituality, the real concern is not liberation. The real concern is not purification to the degree that one will develop love of God. The goal is to be peaceful. The goal is to be sattvic. The goal is to be happy. And you think, okay, I have this wonderful relationship with my wife. We're very happy. Great, that's good. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. And we should be happy. And we're just made for one another. We have a wonderful relationship. We're wonderful partners. We do so many things together, etc., etc. So that's good. But what's happening for those people in the name of spirituality is they're getting very, very attached to one another. And so, and the Bhagavatam says that when a man is overly attached to his wife and family, that's what he thinks of at the time of death, and that draws him back into this world. So the varnashram system is to gradually give up those attachments. Okay, those attachments are there, you're happy, but gradually you have to give them up. But most people don't understand that. So they're really cultivating the happiness part of it, and so that becomes their ultimate stumbling block. Because Prabhupada said that the sense of happiness becomes the, how does he say, the enemy of self-realization. The sense of happiness, material happiness, even happiness in the mode of goodness, can become the very enemy of self-realization because it causes attachment. So it's subtle. It's subtle, but I see this. Sometimes I'll see a couple has a really good relationship, even a better relationship than I have with my wife. And I look at them and I think, these people have such a good relationship. They're never going to really be able to be spiritually advanced because they're too attached. And so that's something that we understand, that, all right, be happy, but don't be so attached that you have to come back and take another body. Okay, where are we? Okay. Yes, moderator. How to use our intelligence, talents, abilities to find eternal happiness. If you, if you study Prabhupada's books, you see that everything is geared towards that. That he'll analyze things and he'll say, well, what is the value of this? We'll look at it and go, well, this is good, this is good, this is good. He'll say, what's the value of that? If the ultimate result of that is you take another birth. Or the result of that is you create karma for which you'll suffer. So we tend to see the immediate result. Oh, this is good, we've done this, we've done that. We've achieved this, achieved that, we're happy with this, we're happy with that. And the spiritualists will say, what's the point? So a guru, he goes right to the essence, and he cuts through a lot of the illusions that we don't even know are illusions, and he makes the point. What is this? What's the result of this? That's what he's asking. So, we have a few minutes. We could read a little more. So, what Ramapada Swami is saying is, there is hierarchy on the spiritual platform as well. It's not that hierarchy is bad. Hierarchy exists everywhere. We want to deny it, or some people want to deny. What does hierarchy mean? That means there's gradations. There's levels of people, there's levels of animals. Within the same species there's levels of intelligence, levels of talents, levels of learning, levels of so many things, strength, fame. You see all this. Even countries are different. Not all countries are the same. Climates are different. There's stronger tigers, there's weaker tigers. So you see this. There's a hierarchy everywhere in the universe. So coming to spiritual life doesn't mean denying that hierarchy, but it means employing that or understanding it and how it can be used in spiritual life. Now we're getting everyone to come when it's time to stop. Shame on you. Okay, let me read a little more. Let us try to just explore the theme of these verses in question from another perspective. So he's saying, okay, let's drop our biases, because whenever we're looking at some verse in the Bhagavatam that doesn't make sense to us, at least it seems to be something that's not really spiritual, it seems to be a verse that's discriminating against a certain class of people, then we have to drop our biases and try to see it on face value and not bring in our conceptions to it. So, let's look at it from another perspective. Suppose that a similar idea was conveyed in the following context. Quote, the inhabitants of Vaikuntha were attended to by their servants, and although they were given all sorts of comforts by these servants, there was no sense of exploitation, and the residents found no pleasure in these indulgences. They were simply absorbed in the service of the Lord, indifferent to the attentions given by their servants. So he's changing, it's the same verse, but he's changing from consorts or wives to servants. So he's saying, okay, let's look at it that way. And what would that mean? Were such statements to be made, should it be taken to indicate that there are relative distinctions of master and servant, and the position of servant is in some way inherently inferior? Not for those of us who understand the spiritual concept of servitorship. But the very mention of such a concept would be abhorred by someone who is sensitized by a proletariat idea of exploitation of working class and sympathetic to the cause of abolishing all distinctions between social classes. So in other words, he's saying, in the world we live in a world of exploitation. So lower people in lower rungs of society are exploited by people in higher rungs of society. So the word servant implies, what does the word servant mean? It means you lack privileges that your master has. You lack the freedom that your master has. It may mean that you lack qualities that your master has. And that's why you ended up the servant and he ended up the master. But we understand from the spiritual perspective, everyone in any relation to Krishna is ecstatic. And that servant is not thinking, why can't I be the master? But we're reading it and thinking, oh, here's a master and there's a servant. The master must be exploiting and the servant must be unhappy. And that's the material concept, because that's how it works in this world, generally. Okay. So he ends. But those of us familiar with Srila Prabhupada's teachings know well how he dismantled such ideologies of classless societies impractical and unnatural. So here he's giving the example. Okay, you can have servants in the spiritual world. So there appears to be a class, but those servants aren't exploited and those servants aren't unhappy. Because we're all servants of Krishna, and they're just in a particular relation with Krishna. We know that through our philosophy, isn't it? That there are 5 rasas, and one is servitorship. So you think in the spiritual world, people are walking around and saying, oh, you're only a servant of Krishna? I'm a friend? Obviously not. Everyone sees everyone as Guru. Everyone sees everyone as greater than they. Okay, Bhakti Carol says, the man has duties and responsibilities, the woman has duties. It's a division of responsibilities. What works, what's practical, what's natural. Certain things which are natural for men, there's certain things which are natural for women. Is that an absolute statement? No, it's not absolute. It's just, in general, we'll find that. Right? Men are good fixing things around the house. Women are good decorating the house. Right? That's just, normally that's how it is. It may not always be that way. The moderator says, if the goal is to become the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna, then isn't being in a man's body who likes to be the master a disadvantage? It can be. It definitely can be. And I think we have to take advantage of every situation we're in, and we have to play down upon our disadvantages. So the male body has some advantages and some disadvantages. The female body has some advantages and disadvantages. We play up the advantages, we play down the disadvantages. We minimize the disadvantages, or sublimate, subdue the disadvantages, so they don't inhibit us, and then we play to our strengths. And that's definitely a strength that women have, is their natural desire to serve. And that's a definite weakness the men have, is their big egos. They don't, it's often harder to tell a man what to do than it is for a woman. They may tend to think they know better than you, and they don't want to do it. So that does happen. So a lot of times I see that also. I see with women how they have a certain nature, and I think that's a big advantage in devotional service. And Prabhupada said that women are tender-hearted, and they tend to come out in greater numbers at religious ceremonies. And the men may come and try to intellectualize everything and say, oh, this is all nonsense, I don't believe this. This is just for women. They're sentimental. This is for the grandmothers and the kids and the housewives, not for smart people. So that becomes a disadvantage of the man. The man thinks, I'm so smart that I don't need this stuff. Can think that way. Generally, women would be less inclined to think like that. So that's a good point. So, now, it is past 9. So, I wanted to thank you all for listening. This class will be available shortly at krishna.com/Mahatma, along M-A-H-A-T-M-A, along with the other 6 classes we've recorded on this topic. Well, along with all the other classes I recorded. And if you'd like to come to Alachua in 2 weeks, on March 14th, Sunday, 2010, I'm doing a seminar, but if you want to come, you have to be a man. I hate to discriminate, but if you're not a man, you'll have to dress up like a man. Now, if you're not a man, you wouldn't enjoy. If you're not a man and you came to this seminar, you'd probably faint or throw up or both. The title of this seminar is called Sexual Purity for Men. Ladies, you wouldn't want to come and find out what a sorry lot the men are when it comes to their attractions for women. Although it would be helpful for you to know about it, because then you could help them. But anyway, this is going to be Sunday, March 14th. So if you want to come fly across the world and come, you're welcome. It's going to start at 10 o'clock and go to 3:30, and then you could go to the Sunday feast in Alachua. So, you can have a great time. You need to email me at mahatmadasa@gmail.com. Email me to let me know you're coming, and then I can send you the materials and all other instructions. And I'll tell you about how this class came out. I'll take a few minutes of your time. Having been a devotee for a long time, I was well aware by personal experience of the difficulties in maintaining sexual control and sexual purity. And I felt, in a sense, that it's unfair for our men to take vows of celibacy or make any effort to be sexually controlled unless in our movement we have some support system where they can go and learn how to do it, or they can go when they need help, when they need guidance, when they're in a weakened state, when they need tools, they need a place where they can discuss their problems. So that thought was just a seed, and then one day I came across a book called Every Man's Battle, which was written by a Christian man who had a very difficult time controlling himself sexually growing up. And he finally was able to become sexually pure. And he wrote about how he did it from the Krishna perspective, but it totally fits in with the Krishna conscious point of view. And so he made many good points in there, and that stimulated me. When I read the book, I said, yes, we need to do a course on this. And I had spoken with another devotee who had a lot of experience in this area, and he said, they have Sexaholics Anonymous, you should get their book. So I got their book and studied that. Of course, studied what Prabhupada had said for many years about this and practiced it myself. And I put all this together in a very deep, penetrating way with the intention of getting really to the heart of the issue, what's really at the heart of sexual purity for men, and how to remain sexually pure, what to do when they're inclined not to be sexually pure, how to deal with all the allurements and attractions that exist in our modern culture, and see it all from a Krishna conscious point of view. And particularly, the biggest challenge men have is how to deal with sexual control when they're not strong, when they're not Krishna conscious, when they're not satisfied, when they're in a position where Maya can easily capture them. So that, you're all welcome to come if you're a man. And maybe we'll do one for women, and in that course we'll tell all the women how men think. And we'll have to have doctors in there because you'll all be fainting and vomiting when you really find out what goes on in a man's mind. It's not pretty. So, give me an email if you'd like to come, or if you have any further questions about it, and we will see you next Tuesday. Thank you. Hare Krishna.